Hello, hello. So, for today, I thought I would do something a little bit more fun and different from my usual Clocktower streams. I've got here in front of me a tier list for all the Trouble Brewing characters, excluding the Travelers, that I made specifically for this video. And I will go into a little bit of why I'm thinking of where to place them. These are in script order. So yeah, let's get started. First character being the Washerwoman. Hmm. So, for the Washerwoman, I would say... I think the Washerwoman is somewhere between A and B tier. I'll put it in A for now. Uh, the strength of the Washerwoman is that of confirming a player. And usually that is a townsfolk role that either has information or some other use for the town. Um, Bar is Pymus registration and or poisoning and or drunkenness. The Washerwoman is pretty useful. What I like that it does is that it ties the alignment of one player to another. And in some situations that can actually be pretty powerful. So the strength of a Washerwoman in particular is if the town has come to a point where they're building worlds where certain players need to be evil together and those worlds break due to other players having information that disprove them, then pairs comprising of the Washerwoman and their confirmee slash the Librarian and their confirmee can be proven to contain at least one good player in that way. As a storyteller, if I'm putting a Washerwoman in the bag, some of my favorite roles to confirm are roles that generally get bad reputation or that rarely die. So I think Washerwoman confirming a Raven Keeper is powerful, one of my favorite things to do. Washerwoman confirming the Soldier is pretty cool. Again, because you may or may not have a knight that know that. And the Soldier is just kind of there, you know. Roles that I don't think I would confirm as the Washerwoman are probably the Mayor, just because it feels a little bad. At least in most circumstances. I've Washerwoman confirmed the Empath in a game, and that developed in a really interesting way because the Empath was actually one of the main demon candidates. But yeah, I like the dynamic that revolves around the Washerwoman as a character. I think it's pretty solid. I don't think it's the strongest, but it's pretty solid. With a similar logic, I think I would put the Librarian in B. These characters are pretty much equivalent in what they do. The difference being that with the Librarian, the player you're confirming is not usually an information role. So in the way that the Librarian helps, the Librarian can help by confirming the Saint for sure. Because if the Saint is trusted, then that's one less lost condition that you need to worry about. It can help by confirming a drunk, because locating the drunk within 3 players in most scenarios is also quite powerful. It tells other people that they can trust their information or that the role is working. Librarian and Recluse are kind of the spice picks, and sometimes I like to see them, but I would still take Washerwoman confirmation over Librarian confirmation in most games. So that's why I'm putting the Librarian below the Washerwoman. Nice and fun role, just not what I think helps best in Trouble Brewing. Investigator. Okay. This might be a hot take, but I think Investigator is a solid S tier character. It works differently from Washerwoman and Librarian in that instead of pointing you to someone you can trust, it points you to somebody you cannot trust, and you don't know who it is. But the reason I enjoy having Investigator, and the reason why I think Investigator is really powerful, is Trouble Brewing is at the core kind of a social script. It has light to moderate information, but also moderate sources of misinformation. Knowing that the investigator has a most likely sober ping is really powerful because it helps the town build around certain worlds, regardless of what the investigator is seeing. Seeing a Baron can help trust outsider claims. Seeing a Scarlet Woman can help, say, a fortune teller with their information. Seeing a poisoner warns the town about misinformation. Spy, I think Spy is probably my least favorite in terms of what Investigator can see. It's an interesting Spy's pick, though Spy generally becomes more evident with other aspects of the gameplay that don't necessarily include an Investigator. But yeah, really good Virgin Confirm, especially on the first day. Really good for world building. Very, very solid character overall, especially in Trouble Brewing. Chef. So I think I'll put the chef somewhere between S and A. I'm just going to put this one next to another, not necessarily in order of the strongest to the left and the weakest to the right. But yeah, I'll place chef here. I think chef is actually more powerful when they get a known zero number versus when they get a 0. Chef is always strong. I think Chef is an underrated character in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's not as good to Virgin Confirm as the other used or known roles on the script. And a lot of the world building depends on like where you're placing the evil characters. And in that sense, the Recluse can also mess with Chef information in ways that make it less useful. Empath. Okay. I think Empath is S tier. And I don't know whether that's disputable or not, but I genuinely see Empath and Investigator as probably the strongest townsfolk on this script. Here's why. And I will make my case together with my next placement, which is the Fortune Teller. And I'm going to put the Fortune Teller in C, and I know that this is going to look weird as hell, but hear me out. Alright, so Empath and Fortune Teller are two similar characters in that they're two evil detectors that get recurring information. The difference between Empath and Fortune Teller is that the Empath helps you find evil players in general, whereas the Fortune Teller helps you find the demon specifically. Now, on Trouble Brewing, I believe the Empath to be way stronger, for a very simple reason. Let's look at the sources of misinformation. So, one of them is obviously the drunk. One of them is the poisoner. And those sources of misinformation affect all characters. All of them. Then we have the Recluse, which can register to the Empath as evil and to the Fortune Teller as the demon. But what adds to muddying the information of the Fortune Teller specifically is, number one, they're red herring. The Empath doesn't have anything like it. Number two, possible presence of a Scarlet Woman and or star passes, which move the demon by definition. The one source of misinformation on the script that affects the Empath but not the Fortune Teller is the spy. But in that sense, I will argue that the misinformation that affects the Empath makes the Empath a more resilient character against world building that messes with their own information. That is to say, for an Empath, it is much easier to tell if and when they have been poisoned, drunked, or otherwise got incorrect information than for a Fortune Teller. A Fortune Teller gets a binary result on every check. It's a yes or a no, every night that they are alive, regardless of possible reasons. If the Empath starts with 2 neighbors and continues to have those 2 neighbors, and their number changes for those neighbors, then they know that something is up. The Fortune Teller does not have that. For a Fortune Teller, if they start with a certain set of information, and then they get a yes, a no, a yes, another no, like all of those sets of information are unrelated unless they specifically choose to recheck the same person. And checking the same person, even for 2 nights in a row, getting a yes first and a no later, does not help the Fortune Teller unless they already have a yes on more than 4 different people. As in, 2 sets of 2. Because without any other factors and without misinformation in the mix, without recluse, without anything like it, the fortune teller should have two pure yeses, the demon and the red herring. In most games that I've seen where there was an input and or a fortune teller, I definitely have seen the input make much bigger impact on the overall result of the game rather than the fortune teller. So that is my take. And speaking of takes, we have the Undertaker coming up next. Undertaker, I think Undertaker is a solid A character. So the main thing that holds the Undertaker back is, of course, the fact that if there's a spy and or the game is suspected to be a spy game, the Undertaker will receive less trust. Other than that, the misinformation that they receive, well, I will put the Undertaker, I'd say, in between Empath and Fortune Teller when it comes to misinformation resilience. The Undertaker gets unrelated sets of information because it's not to read one specific player as something. But it is still possible for them over the course of the entirety of the game to be able to tell if any misinformation has to have happened. I'll take a game as an example here. I was once an Undertaker in a strings pulling game, so Trouble Brewing plus the Marionette. And there were 12 players, and I saw 3 minions. Now, in a 12-player game, you only have 2. At that point, I knew that something was up. If I'd been the fortune teller with 3 yeses in the exact same game, I wouldn't have known that I was necessarily poisoned. I could have thought there was a Star Pass, I could have thought the Scarlet Woman was in play. I only knew that something was weird because I was the Undertaker. So yes, Undertaker is also a fun character to be. I think Undertaker is quite well paired with Chef, I feel. Chef and Undertaker in the same game, with sober information and trusting each other, they can massively help build worlds. Just as an example, a Chef with a 0, with an Undertaker that has just gotten an evil character and they trust that information, essentially confirms the neighbors of the player that just got undertaken as good. Bar the many caveats that there could be, of course. But yeah, it is a pretty good combination. Monk. Monk is very, very fun. I honestly have a hard time placing this. I'm not entirely sure where it should be. Monk is... Do I think the Monk is stronger than the Undertaker or not? Maybe what I should do is this. Maybe I should put the Librarian in C. Because overall, like, stating that the Fortune Teller impacts the game less than the Librarian is incorrect, I feel. But at the same time, I think Washerwoman, Chef, and Undertaker generally have a greater impact on the game than a Monk. I've seen... So Monk is a very hit or miss character, and I mean that in a quite literal way. So if the Monk gets a protect off in a game where no one is claiming soldier, they kind of conform themselves, bar any situation in which the imp may have star passed or intentionally sunk a kill. The problem with that is it is sometimes difficult for a Monk to actually get a protect off before they die. And I've seen so many Monks be framed hard, even when they had confirmation from other sources. I have told the game of Trouble Brewing, where the Monk essentially won the game by saving a player, saving the butler actually. That was a really interesting Monk protect. And yeah, saving the butler made the butler trusted, and the Monk trusted, and it brought odds back on evens. So there were, I believe there were 7 players alive going into the night when the Monk got their protect off. So the town gained an execution from that, and a lot of information with building with the Baron, which was actually in play, and lots of other things. But I've not seen the Monk make an impact as often as other characters. So yeah. Raven Keeper is generally one of my favorites, but I don't know where I should place it. I don't think it's S tier. I don't even think it's A. B? I do think a Raven Keeper that successfully gets their information and is sober in most games is about as good as a washerwoman, because they will choose a good player most of the time if they die early, just based on pure numbers. So if you are the Raven Keeper and you pick someone who is alive, you are much more likely to choose a good player than an evil player. If you die later in the game, then the odds change, of course. But Raven Keepers dying later in the game is not something that I often see happen. I see Raven Keepers either die early or not at all, and then get executed for being suspicious. Raven Keepers seeing a minion or the demon and winning the game for good are quite rare in my experience. I'm not entirely sure. My gut tells me it's between B and C. I have bias with this character because I die on night 2 so much when I get it, and I just think it's really fun to play. It suits my playstyle of being a little bit silly and a little bit chaotic. But in reality, I don't think Raven Keeper is the strongest on Trouble Brewing specifically. It's a great bluff. I'm just not sure how much it does for the town. Virgin. I think I'll put Virgin in A. So each time that the Virgin procs, they confirm themselves and another player as either good or the spy, which is some amount of information. I think what would make me consider putting the Virgin in S as opposed to A is if there was a case of a very strong information role nominating the Virgin in the very, very late game and getting a lot of information from that. I've never seen it happen. I'm rooting for it to happen at some point. But yeah, otherwise, I generally see Virgins proccing early on just or knowing roles that just want to confirm their information and then sit there. I actually do think, in a weird way, the Virgin makes the Monk stronger. Or maybe the other way around. This is because Monk is hard to bluff believably with a confirmed Virgin in play. So if you're the Monk, at some point you'll kind of have to protect the Virgin for being a confirmed good player if you want to help your team. You don't have to because it's your agency and yada yada, but if you're trying to help your team and you want to protect someone you trust, then the Virgin is an obvious choice. And I've seen games where the actual Monk was taken to Final 3 with the confirmed Virgin because the evil team was trying to frame them, and they were successful. But what that does is it still takes a confirmed player into Final 3. For Monk. Justice for the Monk. Slayer. I'm almost tempted to check the Slayer at the bottom of the tier. I've been a Slayer more than I've been any other character. Maybe I'm just a little bit salty, but I think Slayer is Bad Virgin in Trouble Brewing. Bad Virgin because the odds of a Slayer confirming themselves are about 1 in the amount of players that they get to shoot. Assuming that they're not poisoned or drunk. And the probability of the Slayer being evil, poisoned, or drunk essentially increases for as much as they are alive over the course of the game. A late game Slayer shot that's actually successful and wins the game for good is super satisfying. But in terms of actual impact, which, if it wasn't clear, that's the metric I'm using to actually make this tier list, I'm not sure that the Slayer ever really does much for the good team. Slayer and Saint is a good combination. I'll come back to that when we actually get to the Saint. But there's caveats. Soldier. Yeah, I mean, I think soldier just needs to be below monk by association. Uh, the difference between soldier and monk is the soldier can only really save themselves if they are sober. The monk can choose who they save. They can play a little chicken game with the demon, but ultimately, the the upside of having a soldier is if they're trusted, they can always go to final three regardless of how many evil players are alive. But that kind of assumes that there is no poison alive too, and that the soldier will be trusted in final three if they get to it. Which, again, not something that happens very much in my experience. Mayor. I do like Mayor more than these other roles. I'm not entirely sure it deserves B. Once again, between B and C. But I do see Mayor wins more often than I see wins from a fortune teller picking the demon or from a soldier getting to final three, at the very least. I think Mayor is decent if they manage to get confirmation from another information role. So if they are in an empath 0, for example, if they get seen by a Raven Keeper, if they have a washerwoman backing them up, a washerwoman that was undertaken that can back them up, yada yada yada. Sometimes, even if there is an early death that is believed to be a mayor bounce, which maybe B is correct. I think I'm leaving the mayor in B. It's a fun character. Can usually redirect maybe one kill over the course of the game. Sometimes wins the game for good. It's being the mayor is fun. I think I enjoy knowing that I have a character that's not likely to die too soon. But I don't see epic mayor wins as often as wins based on characters in S tier or A tier solving the game for their team. Butler. One of my friends loves the Butler. I don't, honestly. Yeah, Butler just gets the bottom of the tier. And this is, for the outsiders specifically, based on how much they help the evil team. I believe that Butler is a very strong and interesting character to have on scripts where voting power is important. I don't believe the Trouble Brewing is one such script. Maybe at lower player counts. But in Trouble Brewing, there is no extra evil. There's nothing that really manipulates or there's no information based on voting or nominations, like, say, Flower Girl or Town Crier in SMV. And so what the Butler does is just kind of remove a vote from a possible evil nomination if they choose an evil player or a good player that doesn't vote. Yeah, sure, fine. If let's just pause and compare the Butler to these other outsiders, like the Drunk. I don't think it will surprise anyone to put the Drunk in S tier, right? I think the Drunk is, by far and at large, one of the best outsiders in this entire game. Not just the script, the whole game. The layers of complexity that the Drunk adds to the solve are endless. For starters, no one can trust their information. A virgin that is not proctored by a townsfolk can suspect that they are drunk, or that townsfolk claim is wrong and not necessarily evil. It adds to the outsider count, because if you hide an outsider behind the drunk, then you don't necessarily trust open outsider claims or face-up outsider claims. The drunk is great. Absolutely freaking great. Chef Kiss. It's not in the same tier as the chef, but they're just having a nice time. Chef and drunk. Yeah, okay. Recluse. I have great positive bias towards this character. I do think that overall, it is less powerful than drunk. It's pretty close, but it's not quite there. Recluse is amazing for just about half of these characters. Like, I don't know. The Recluse next to an empath is always fun. Recluse messing with chef information is fun. You get a chef 1 and maybe you want to kill the neighbors of the Recluse, maybe you don't. Who knows? There might be a chef 1 somewhere else. You should the Recluse to the Undertaker as whatever you want. Recluse is really, really solid. I especially like it as an evil bluff because it can justify so much. And based on the ability of the Recluse, often people will just execute the Recluse regardless if they don't know whether or not they can trust the Recluse by outsider count. So yeah, great character to have. Greaves the Fortune Teller. I'm sorry, I really just don't like the Fortune Teller. Yeah. Saint. I think Saint is also a solid A tier character. Again, for bluff potential more than anything else. You pretty much cannot touch the Saint unless you're in Final 3, or you have overwhelming evidence that the Saint claim is evil. Or the game just ends. Or you could roll the dice, I guess, and just hope that it's not a re-rack, but yeah, that's the purpose of the Saint, pretty much. And since I said I would come back to this, Slayer and Saint. Slayer makes the Saint better. A late Slayer shot on the Saint is about the one redeeming factor that I would consider for Slayer as a character to go up a tier, or maybe two. But there's always a world where the Saint can be surpassed too, or can be the Scarlet Woman, so it's just like, yeah. Slayer is a sad character. I will say, I've rarely seen Saints be executed, which is actually quite interesting. And mostly when they were executed, it was the correct thing to do, because it was an evil player that was bluffing Saint. It's a fascinating character. I love Saint on Leech scripts. Saint on Leech scripts is just so funny. I'm a little mean, I know. Poisoner. I will also put Poisoner in S tier. I think Poisoner messing primarily with information, but also with other characters like the monk, and or the mayor, and or the slayer sometimes is very good. Poisoner is one of the most effective minions. I think there's a reason Poisoner is on so many scripts. I believe, based on the statistics on the BOTCscripts.com website, Poisoner is in more than half of the scripts. Yeah, so it is extremely common for an extremely obvious reason. Really good minion, really flexible, high agency. Poisoner is the kind of minion that I think has a low floor and a high ceiling. And I appreciate characters that do, because it really makes a difference how much you're aware of the game state and what vibes you get on the other players when it comes to poisoning your targets. First night is always a crapshoot, sure. Second night you have some idea what some people are, and you can poison one of them by process of elimination or just go elsewhere if you don't think that they are important. Third night and onwards, a living poisoner can do a lot of damage. And that's great. Spy. I'll be honest, I don't think the spy is that good. I see the argument for it. You may want to kill some characters immediately. You may want to know where they are so that you don't touch them. Like, you know where the soldier is, you don't touch them. You know where the mayor is, you can poison kill them. You don't touch the saint, whatever. But spy only really makes a difference for maybe the first night of kills or two. And if it looks very obviously like a spy game, that automatically removes one of the possible minions from the world building that other people are doing. And if that minion removes the poisoner and or the Scarlet Woman because you think there is a spy and the Baron, then that kind of does a lot for a good team. That being said, I've never actually been the spy, so who knows? I think there are some uses for spy that people don't think very much about. So, for example, you can start as the spy next to an empath and get a 0, and then you can orchestrate receiving a star pass from the imp in a situation where the empath will think that their one is on their other neighbor because they've died. It's kind of difficult to get there. It depends on the sequence of executions and knife bets. But that's one of the few things that I think the spy can do that not many other characters can do. Otherwise, of course, you can always make a play as the spy of gaining trust on day one, nominating the virgin, or being undertaken as your used or knowing role of choice to frame whoever you want to frame. But there's a few plays that can be made. I don't think any of them are particularly strong compared to the plays that you can make as the other characters, but who knows? Scalded Woman. I think Scalded Woman for me is somewhere between S and A. Would I rather have a Scarlet Woman or a Poisoner if I'm evil? That is a very good question. I think the answer is both. I think Poisoner and Scarlet Woman is by far the strongest minion combination in 2 minion games in Trouble Brewing. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure. I think I'll drop the Scarlet Woman in A, but I could see a case for either tier. It's honestly great to have the escape hatch and just think, you know, I'm the demon, but I can die up until Final 5 and not care. It helps against Slayer, which is a character that I don't love. It helps against a number of other characters. It makes Fortune Teller less great in a way. But characters like the Empath, if you're the Scarlet Woman, they won't save you. You still get read as evil, and if the Empath is trusted, you're done for. It won't save you if you nominate the Virgin. Like, yeah, there's a number of situations where the Scarlet Woman is, I think, not as useful as the Poisoner, but on the other hand, there are also some situations where the Poisoner just kind of can't do anything. For example, if all of the roles that are worth poisoning are either executed or otherwise die by night 3 or so. So, this is a little bit situational, right? Okay, I've changed my mind. Let's move a Scarlet Woman up a tier. Scarlet Woman is good. Baron. I've honestly heard so many people say that the Baron is an S tier character. I disagree with that. I think Baron is easily S tier if you are the kind of player that likes to have fun and not care too much about what happens. Because as a setup character that has no other responsibility whatsoever, that has just added outsiders and that's it, then the Baron is pretty much the best character to be. Like, what else could you possibly want? The reason I don't love the Baron as a character is sometimes removing information is good for the evil team, sometimes it's not. And you can end up in a situation where the town trusts that it's a Baron game, and therefore they trust a bunch of outsiders that I've just claimed. And they just need to find the drunk, and then they trust the drunk too, so that suddenly the demon candidates are few and far in between. And I don't love that. I would like to see more games where the Baron actually tries to earn trust and then catches the star pass later in the game, because I think it would be very, very funny. Oh, actually, I was once in a game where that exact thing happened. It was a really weird 15-player TB. Really, really weird. What made it weird was that we had some players that were more experienced and some other players that were just completely new to the game. And in the game, I was the Poisoner, I believe. And we had the Poisoner, a Baron, and the Scarlet Woman. So the demon was killed by the Gunslinger. the Scarlet Woman caught it and was going pretty much undisturbed, coasting along for most of the game. And this was thanks to a Liberian bluff that I had suggested to them, because I had identified an outsider and then spoken to the Scarlet Woman to say, you can claim Liberian who has seen this outsider, was the butler, and the outsider will probably trust you. And the worst, they will build words where you are the spy in the late game. Then the Scarlet Woman, now demon, decides to surpass to the Baron, who was pretty much out to demon for days, and gave us a final 3 where I had so much panic. I was panicking inside so hard. My luck was that people read me as more demon than minion due to what I was doing. So in the end, I got executed and we won. But oh boy, yeah, that was a very game. I also once was the Baron and my demon killed me on night 2. I'm not entirely sure why. Anyway, Imp. There's not really much to say about the Imp with regards to other demons, because it is the only demon on the script. I think overall, Imp is probably between A and S tier. It is a very mobile demon that just does the job, Sometimes that's all you need. But there's not really any other demon to compare it against here. And if you're playing Trouble Brewing, you know that you're dealing with an Imp. So it's a solid character, just nothing really too special about it on the script specifically. So yeah, that about concludes it. We've got a bunch of A-tier characters, which I think Trouble Brewing is a really good script in that it does what it can to make a balanced game that feels winnable for both sides, and usually ends with the good team having a couple of worlds and needing to choose between which one they believe is correct, and the evil team maybe losing a couple of their members early on or over the course of the game, not completely stomping, and then trying to navigate and get into town to buy into the world that they're trying to sell, so that they can achieve the win. I will say, honestly, Trouble Brewing is not my favorite of the base 3 scripts. If anything, I would rather play any of the other 2 rather than Trouble Brewing. I'd pretty much always choose SMV or BMR over it. But one thing that I really appreciate of TB that I think SMV and BMR do not have is exactly this type of balance, where you've got a little bit of everything, and anything is possible in the sense that building words is good, is kind of challenging, but also does not require too much effort due to the medium amount of information that you get. So you don't have to navigate crazy worlds with thousands of possibilities. You just follow the vibes and hope that you are correct. So that will be it for the Trouble Brewing character tier list. I will love to hear what your opinions are, so if you're so inclined, please leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.